Hello everyone, this is update for October 12, 2022, day 231 of the war and of the date update. So as a heads up for those who are waiting for update on the front line, there's essentially no changes. I would say there is no changes. There are obviously intensive fighting, but there is no sort of results to sort of show. Uh, what I would like to discuss is actually today more focus on general situation, sort of strategic problems, and actually would like to start with this dam near Nova Kakhovka. This is this dam here, if everybody remembers, that's being attacked by Ukraine, used to be by Ukrainian forces pretty extensively. So as you can see, this is sort of this whole dam in original state. As you can see here, this is where this is bypass channel here. So you can see this is bypass channel. This is that bypass channel. This is the actual dam here, as you can see. So Ukrainian command attacked this bridge over the bypass channel and essentially destroyed it, as you can see here. However, Russian command managed to create sort of temporary bridges or pontoon. Well, I wouldn't say it's pontoon bridges, but basically they established temporary bridges. One of them, actually here, as you can see, was destroyed, and also they actually, it looks like they managed to put a bunch of gravel to kind of create basically artificial dam, I guess I could say that, which is the most reliable sort of solution out of all of this. As you can see, there is a traffic, there is some track or something, there are also tracks here. So basically what this kind of tells us is that the situation, let's actually look at this, the situation on Kherson bridgehead may not be as bad as it used to be in terms of the ammunition supply and other things. And similar situation is actually with the pontoon or bridges or bridge in Darivka over in Hulets River. Similar way, Russian command managed to put 2 or 3 pontoon bridges there, and so basically for now it's not perfect, but the supply system looks like it has been sort of renewed, reestablished, and at the same time doesn't look that Ukrainian command is staying on top of destroying those pontoon or those temporary bridges essentially. I don't have explanation why, what's going on, because Ukraine has more than enough of um, those HIMARS launchers, and also with the HIMARS rockets. Don't have really answer, and that's probably part of the reason why the offensive on the Kherson bridgehead just bogged down and doesn't move forward. At the same time, in the long run, I want to repeat, the situation is the fate of this whole Kherson bridgehead is sealed. As long as Ukrainian command is staying on top of destroying these bridges, the supply will dwindle and all of these troops will be forced to evacuate or to surrender. So this is just kind of like quick update on what's going on here on Kherson bridgehead. Now let's actually switch to effects of all of this 2 days of attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, and that really means energy, electricity generation and electricity distribution, because they go hand in hand, right? So there were attacks against the electricity generation facilities and distribution, more so against distribution facilities. So the Russian basically side trying to create bottlenecks at both levels. So as a result of that, output of electricity has reduced officially by 30%, probably more like 35%. So the way this 35 or 30% is going to be covered is 10 or 5% is going to be depending on the number that you use. is going to be covered by stopping um, export of electricity to the neighboring countries such as Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, and Moldova, and so on. So that being stopped, but then there's still a shortage of 25%, and that shortage is going to be covered through basically cutting uh, supply to everybody in Ukraine, and that really means that country has sort of controlled blackouts from at certain times in different regions at this point. So basically, the system did not collapse. The takeaway is the following: so the damage was pretty deep, and the system on the verge. If there is another day of attacks or 2 days of attacks with a similar results, the system probably will collapse and disintegrate in those smaller islands that are not connected to each other. This has not happened. The system is sitting on sort of on the edge, and the way it was resolved by basically uh, of say supplying less electricity to consumers. So one of the affected areas is obviously industrial production. So one of the casualty of all of this is ferroalloy production, which is centered here in Nikopol. Nikopol has a large deposits of manganese ore, which then sort of refined, and the end product is ferrosilicon manganese, which is additive for making high quality steels. So that's a sort of critical component to make those high quality steels. And all of that production is going to get shut down at the end of the month because there's obviously not enough electricity, and it consumes a lot of electricity. So, and the significance of this for the world is that Ukraine is second largest producer and exporter of this ferroalloy, which is critical, as I said, for production of high quality steels. So, as everybody can imagine, this is going to add to inflation situation in the world. And the largest importers are those who produce high quality, high value add steels. Let's put it this way, which is Japan, Germany, U.S., Netherlands, I think Turkey and Italy. Those are the largest ones, but there's one bunch of other countries. So as you can imagine, this is going to put even additional inflationary pressures in the world um, as a result of all of this. Uh, and then there's sort of more kind of like, how to say, effect that sort of that influences life of ordinary citizens in Ukraine. So apparently, there is some system has been affected at the Ministry of Internal Affairs that is in charge of issuing driving licenses. So the issuance of driver licenses has been suspended. So you cannot, in case you lose or you need new one or something, you cannot get new driver license, and then even worse, you cannot register your car. So basically, if you do sell or buy transactions, you need to register the car with the Ministry of Internal Affairs. So essentially, there's a lot of economic activity being affected and being stopped at this point. So those sort of major facts. Then let's move a little bit to, I guess, Russia and US. So US is proposing cap on Russian crude oil at $60 per barrel, which is probably not gonna work, and the reason it's not gonna work is because of China. China is a large buyer, and if China does not support this action, then it's not gonna work. And the reason why China probably is not gonna support this action is just because I think two days ago, U.S. Basically sanctioned semiconductor manufacturing industry in China. So basically, preventing export of high tech, basically technology to manufacture semiconductors and chips and all of that to China, which is obviously a big blow for China. Probably angers China quite a bit, and essentially creating huge blow to Chinese electronics industry. So that for sure is not, let's say, helping China to get on board with that. So probably China will disagree to that, and this desire to create this cap is probably not gonna not gonna work. Not to mention that Russia said in the past that they will simply not supply oil to those countries that stick to this idea of the cap, which again, in the past when price of oil was going up, that the ability to do that was definitely there for Russia, because there was high demand for oil. But as I mentioned before, situation started changing over past, let's say, months or so, maybe a little bit more, as a result of increasing interest rates by Federal Reserve System in the U.S. And there were also more like hawkish speeches out of the Federal Reserve System over the past couple of days, which means that the interest rates may rise even further, which may create huge problems in the financial system in the West in general. So this is a general updates of what's going on. Now let's look at the battlefield and what's going on there on the ground. The exchange of artillery fire along the state border went down somewhat, not significantly, but somewhat sort of less active. Now let's look at North Luhansk section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same. As you can see, Russian troops are actively counterattacking. And basically, what they try to do is split. Well, I don't know. You could say this is bridgehead, kind of like Ukrainian bridgehead on the eastern side, and they want to first split this bridgehead and then obviously clear out this whole area between the two rivers, essentially. So far, they were not successful, but at the same time, Ukrainian troops are not sort of pursuing active offensives or active attacks. It looks like it's all stalled. Again, don't have good explanation for this as well. Why this whole activity being stalled? Because this is really, as I mentioned before, it's a lost opportunity for Ukrainian side, because the basically freshly minted soldiers are pouring into the existing units and making them more capable. And even the quality of those new soldiers is not high, but they will be sort of brought up to some level in the unit once they hit the unit, because there's still experienced and skilled soldiers in those units, basically like a skeleton crews. And they will turn these new soldiers into battle capable sort of material, let's put it this way. So this is again totally unclear why this whole activity stopped here, but that's what it is. Now let's move south. Let's see what's going on at the North Donbass section of the front line. Things here are more or less the same. Wagner mercenaries continuing their aggressive attacks. They don't stop, keep hammering, and pretty much always the same areas. Ladar, sometimes this is Spirne, then Bakhmut. As you can see, they cannot basically the big plan is kind of create like sort of kind of like semi-encirclement around Bakhmut, and kind of like in that way force withdrawal of Ukrainian troops. It's far from sort of being even close to that, but that's sort of you can see that as a big picture what they're trying to do, because street fighting will lead to extremely heavy losses, and Russian command trying to avoid that, and even more so Wagner mercenaries, because they really like using common sense when they sort of fighting, and so they even more cognizant of the losses in general. So beyond this is the most active section of the front line, where the Russian troops the most active on the entire front line these days. Now let's quickly check what's going on at central Donbass front line. Things here are also very similar. Russian attacks out of this Pesky salient, then Russian attacks from northeast to create sort of future encirclement of Avdiivka, and against forced withdrawal of Ukrainian troops is far from anywhere close, but Russian troops continuing their attacks here. Now let's quickly look at Zaporizhya front line. Things here are, as I say, not changing since the beginning of the time. Let's put this way. Essentially, this is stable from probably end of April, early May. Hasn't changed much at all. Now let's look at Kherson bridgehead. Things are sort of somewhat quiet. No active large attacks by Ukrainian forces, mostly just reconnaissance action, counter battery fire, and but as I said before, there's not sort of concentrated effort to basically destroy the pontoon and bridges, ferries, all of those sort of artificial bridges or whatever you call them, to basically make it harder for the Russian command to supply troops here. Also, just want to provide a little update on Crimean Bridge. Russian authorities already rebuilding, working actively on fixing, and there is a good chance that they will fix the road part relatively quickly. And the bigger problem is actually that railroad bridge, whereas I mentioned there's probably quite a bit of structural damage, and you really need to replace those sections, and they're much harder to replace basically and take much more time. But the point is that the Russian side is actively working on fixing everything. At the same time, there's a lot of logistical problems for the Russian side. There's huge line of semi-trailer trucks on the Crimean side that's lined up for the ferries, because now the Russian side is actively using ferries. But as mentioned before, ferries are tiny fraction of their normal throughput of the bridges, so that creates huge logistical problems for the Russian side, not just military wise, but even civilian wise, because a lot of these semi trailer trucks are supplying like civilian goods as well. Then one more thing that I promised was the information about Ukrainian internet system. I did not finish that, so I will do it tomorrow, and I apologize for that. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.